Hi, it's me, Egbert, Egburt, the owner of this radio station. I invite everyone to listen, no matter if you're young, old, black, white, Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, heck, I even want real estate agents listening to my station. Yes, even Rick and Tracy. You're all welcome. Now, it's back to my Goodwill ambassadors, Brad and John.
John, you know what? We try to keep the show local as far as this side of the state or even just the state, but I have to talk about this thing which I find absolutely positively fascinating. The pagers in Lebanon.
Yes.
I mean, when I first heard this, I thought to myself, what? First off, I'm thinking to myself, what are people doing with pagers anymore? How long ago did you have a pager?
I had one in the year of our Lord 2000, Brad, and that was the last time I had a pager.
Right. Okay. Now, once again, I will tell the story that once upon a time, I've always been this guy that I'm not saying on the bleeding edge of technology, but on the leading edge of technology. I've always been the guy who sees things that come along and think to myself, oh, that's how I can make my job more efficient or what I do more efficient or make more money. And back in the day, this is going back into the literally 70s, I bought a pager. Okay, I had a pager. And at the time,
really?
Yes, at the time, only like doctors, and at the time, it was a big like it was the size of a overgrown cigarette pack. It was not very small. Now, what was interesting about it was this was an expensive pager. I had to order it from Motorola. I couldn't just go buy it somewhere. I had to order it from Motorola. It took about a month, and they literally made it for me. That's how it was back in the day. And it was what they called a T&V pager. It was a tone and voice pager. And the way it worked is if I gave you my pager number, you would call my number, and it would say, I think at the time it was a Cybertel pager. It would say, Cybertel paging. Please leave your message. Deet, 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 deet. And then you'd leave a message. Okay, that message was transmitted by radio over the airwaves to my pager. My pager would go off, deet, 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 and then your voice would come out of my pager. So if you paged me, you'd call my number, and you'd say, hey, Brad, this is John. I need to talk to you. Call me back. And within about 5 or 10 seconds, my pager would go off, and that voice would come out of my pager, okay? I made so much money because of the fact that one of the things was, and you're going to laugh when I tell you this, I did disco repair, okay? You ready for this? Disco repair.
I am ready.
In the 70s, because of the fact that if you got a hot club, like in the day Goombas or Michael's in the Time Machine and places like that, and the place is pumping, whatever you want to look at it, and all of a sudden the sound system starts to get funky. Who do you call on a Friday night at 10 o'clock? You got Brad's pager number, and
amazing.
You call Brad, and Brad shows up and fixes the sound system. And let me tell you, at some of the places, like for example at Goombas, which was like, you don't even know what that is, but that was like the building is gone. They tore it down. It was right on the corner of Dorset and 270. Literally, if you came off the ramp from northbound 270 on to Dorset, and it was part of the Godfather's restaurant. The guy who managed that and the disco and stuff like that, I got X amount of money out of the guy. He paid me generously when I showed up on a Friday or Saturday night. Plus, he would give me dinner all the time. And at the time, Godfather's was, not like going to Tony's, but it was probably a couple steps below Tony's. It was a nice meal, and it wasn't cheap. Okay, point being, when I heard this thing, I think, pagers? Who has pagers? But then you get into the story that the Hezbollah, do you know what I'm talking about? Do you know why this happened? Do you know the whole
The whole blow up? Yeah, about the pagers blowing up, right?
But do you know why they went to pagers? Do you know this part of the story?
No, I don't know.
Okay, the reason they went to pagers is because Hezbollah had determined that the Israelis had essentially infiltrated their cellular phone system, and they knew where everybody was. I mean, perfect example, if you have a cellular phone now and you do bad stuff, they know where you're at. They can track you.
Absolutely. So what you're saying is, like, it would almost be like you would go down to the walkie-talkie level because the Israelis wouldn't be able to track your walkie-talkie like they could track your iPhone.
Right. So they went to an older technology, that being pagers. Now, somewhere along the line, and it gets complicated if you read the whole crazy story, it's like Gold Star is this Taiwanese company that originally had the patent on these pagers and stuff like that. But they sub-licensed it to some company in Hungary. So you can sort of piece the pieces of the situation together, and you're going like, okay, we see what's happening here somehow or another, and we pretty much are 99.9% sure it's the Israelis. They infiltrated the production chain somehow, got in there, modified the pagers. At first it came out, and the guy who's on our station right here, Eric Erickson, he said when this whole thing started happening the other day, he was on here and he was saying he's 99% sure these were not explosive devices, that what they were doing was somehow or another they were sending a code to the pager which shorted the battery, and then the battery exploded. Well, first off, they're lithium-ion batteries, but it's not the way lithium-ion batteries usually operate. Usually they operate because what happens is they start to get very hot, and then they go into what they call thermal runaway, where if you've seen some of the pictures of them trying to put out like Teslas that are on fire, they get the fire out and then it reignites, okay? It doesn't necessarily explode. Okay, now it's pretty much come out that yes, they put an explosive charge, they put some kind of C4 or some kind of explosive in these pagers, okay? So I'm thinking to myself, how unbelievable is this? Because who would ever have thought of this? And immediately I thought to myself, there's going to be a movie about this. There's got to be a movie.
It's brilliant, isn't it? It's violent. So this, and by the way, I'm going to paraphrase Donald Trump in a popular meme of, wow, this is the first time I'm hearing this. But I didn't know all the background and how this happened. Actually, Brad, to be honest, I just saw all the funny memes about it, which are hilarious. And I was like, okay, something has to be happening here.
Well, and then yesterday, the walkie-talkies blow up. Did you see this yesterday?
No, I didn't see this.
Yesterday, there's round 2 and what's interesting is there was one shot I saw, one picture I saw on the internet of one of the blown up walkie-talkies, and you could still see the brand name on it, ICOM. ICOM is a huge manufacturer of two-way radio equipment based in Japan. I don't know if they're still in Japan anymore. It's all probably made in China right now. The reason I know that is from my ham radio days. Is ICOM is a very, very, very popular brand among ham radio operators, and apparently it's the same thing. Somehow they infiltrated the supply chain of the walkie-talkies because, once again, they're not supposed to be using cell phones. Now, the interesting aspect of this is, think about it from the aspect of the people that have the pagers, because whoever this guy was head of security for the Hezbollah people said, we can't use our cell phones anymore and he even said, don't even carry a cell phone because they can follow you. They know where you're at. So in other words,
yeah, for sure,
all these pagers were given to high-level operatives, people who were, like the leaders and commanders and strategists and stuff like that. And then the other aspect, the people that had the walkie-talkies that blew up yesterday were not necessarily the high-end people, but they were like boots-on-the-ground kind of people. And the bizarre thing was, there's video of these walkie-talkies exploding yesterday at the funerals of some of the people that were killed by the pagers on Tuesday. I'm going like,
wow. So what's the next evolution of it? Do you have I
have no idea.
Like pen and paper, or what are they going to go to next?
Well, there's a couple. I started when I was down for the count yesterday, not feeling well. I did a deep dive into some of this stuff, and there's a couple interesting guys who were talking about this, who were these very high level, they're much smarter than you and I. Well, that's much smarter than I, probably not much smarter than you, but a very high level people who are sort of these people that look at the situation and say, okay, here's what's going to happen. And they all essentially said the same thing, that this was a tactic that the Israelis were using, not necessarily to kill these people, because they knew they weren't, that the charge they put in these pagers was not like where everyone that went off, it would be like devastating, where the person that carried it would be killed instantly and everybody around him would be, collateral damage. Not that much of a charge, although there were people who were killed. But it was more of an aspect of, hey, we know where you are. We know who you are. That's why you have this pager. And you know what? You think that this is some stuff, you ain't seen nothing yet. So
so it's just sending a message, right? A shot across the proverbial bow.
Right, for them to essentially come to the bargaining table and say, okay, look, you got all these people in southern Lebanon that you've, moved out of southern Lebanon. We've got all these people in northern Israel that we've moved, all these settlers and, these homeowners that moved out of northern Israel. You say you have 100,000 rockets. You may have 100,000 rockets, but we're the Israelis, and guess what? We know a whole bunch of ways to F with you. We just proved it to you. So knock it off. Let's get this thing, taken care of. Let's get to the bargaining table, and let's just move on down the road. I'm thinking to myself, whoa.
And don't you think this is so? I haven't seen much detail coverage of this. You know way more about this than I do. But don't you think this is probably good news for like Radio Shack? Or like at Chesterfield Mall, like, don't you think we'll probably see more foot traffic into Babbage's? Like, people are going to want to pick up, like, some Tandy products.
Well, first off, I think Chesterfield Mall is officially closed. I think that they've shut the doors.
No, I'm pretty sure they just opened a Babbage's there. I just got my Commodore 64 there, Brad. I guess you haven't been there in a while. I went to play pickleball because Evelyn and Geneva and Betty asked me to go play, And they also have, they have multiple of those, those hangars where you can park in the crippled spots. And they always let me use a crippled hangar at Chesterfield Mall for pickleball. And then we went to Babbage's and we got a Commodore 64 and I got a floppy disk with Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego. And it came with a 1989 World Almanac. Now, part of that story is true, Brad. Actually, I did buy Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego at Babbage's, but it was at Jamestown Mall, and it was in 1989. But the rest of that story, I have to admit, I did not make. I do not play pickleball with Geneva and Betty and Evelyn.
Okay. We'll move on from there. Okay. This is something I saw yesterday, which I thought was interesting. Ohio sheriff asked for the residents' addresses with Kamala Harris signs to send illegal immigrants to their homes. Did you hear?
Now, I saw this headline. I didn't see the kicker there, Brett. I didn't know that it was about immigrants. I saw it said, because it was like a liberal, I think it was Kansas City. It was like, can you believe an Ohio sheriff asked for addresses? So explain this, Brad.
Okay, here's the lead paragraph. A sheriff in Ohio took to social media to issue a warning to the public that anyone who is showing support for Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign could eventually house some extra guests. In a post on his personal campaign page, Portage County Sheriff Bruce Zukowski appeared to encourage residents to write down the addresses of supporters for Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris. And this is his quote. He says, when people ask me, what's going to happen if the flip-flopping laughing hyena wins? That's a quote. Zukowski wrote in his post, I say, write down all the addresses of the people who had her signs in their yards. So when the illegal human locust, which she supports, need places to live, once again, I'm quoting, will already have the addresses of their new families who supported the arrival.
That's remarkable. First of all, I have a new favorite sheriff.
Yes, Bruce Zukowski. So there's a story that I've heard a couple different times, and I've never seen it in print, but I've heard it, and I think I even heard it on, of all places, NPR, of the husband and wife couple. They're empty nesters. Their kids moved away, and they've got like a 3 or 4 bedroom house, and they're very much into trying to help the immigrants and blah, 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 blah. And there was some meeting in their county or their town or something like that. We're going to try to help the immigrants, and who would like to help the immigrants? And so they signed up on that list, and like 3 hours later, there's a knock on the door. There's somebody from this committee. Hey, this is the so-and-so family. They're here to live with you. And the lady's going, I didn't know what to do.
Yeah, of course she didn't know what to do. Open up your home to the immigrants.
Right. And the crazy part of it is, it's like, what was the other day that I heard somebody yesterday talking about this, that John Legend, supposedly there's some real estate channel or something like that, or some, maybe it's, in the old days would have been lifestyles of the rich and famous. Remember, they have lifestyles of the rich and famous.
Yeah, it's just, I'm Robin Leach.
Right, Robin Leach. Okay, and supposedly recently or maybe it was some kind of Zillow ad or something like that. Anyway, there was a tour of John Legend's house in Beverly Hills or wherever heck he's at. What's the Beverly Hills? There's another couple other places.
Like Bel Air.
Bel Air, that's the one I'm looking for. Bel Air, okay? And yet the next day he's saying, you should help the immigrants. And this guy said, I saw John Legend's house on a real estate thing. He's got plenty of spare bedrooms. Why doesn't he put the immigrants in his bedrooms? I'm going like, once again.
Yeah. It's a fair point. Well, I'm glad that we got to the resolution of what the rest of that headline was, because I knew it was something that was going to be good, Brad,
Yes.
but they couldn't encapsulate it in one headline.
Right. Give them the address of all the Kamala Harris supporters, because when she wins, he's going to deliver the illegals to their house. Hey, you supported her. Here we go again. You talk about this deal with Holly given the 31st. There was a guy, we're talking about this next break. There was a guy who was, and I've heard this guy before, and it's pretty interesting. Do you ever hear these people, like you and I can sit here and we can pontificate about this and that, and then you hear some guy that has like he's tell you, say, well, if you do this, it's going to cost you X. And if you do this, it's going to cost you 3 times X. And they get these very, very detailed explanation. I heard this guy yesterday, and I've heard him before. I can't remember his name. I should write this stuff down. It's terrible. I heard this guy. I can't remember who it was. But he gives an explanation of the voting system, and it's pretty interesting. And he's a pro-Republican kind of guy. And he's going exactly against the grain of the Republicans. It's for the main part. So anyway, we'll talk about that next break, okay?
All right.
Or we'll talk about it in the next segment, block, whatever you want to call it.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?